Welcome to MORSL's workshop on crafting a personal sacred space. My name is Carlene Gardner, and I'm the director of MORSL, which is the McGill Office of Religious and Spiritual Life. We're recording this on March 31st, 2020, amid a global pandemic of novel coronavirus, or COVID-19. Most of us are spending a lot more time at home now, and it can be challenging to squeeze so many aspects of our lives into one single space. Even if you're used to doing work and school from home, having to tend to your spiritual needs from home may be something new. We hope this workshop will help guide you through the process of crafting your own space to meet those needs. Since we're talking about space and the sacredness of space, it's important to acknowledge the land we're on. I'm recording this workshop from what I know is the island of Montreal, the same area of land on which McGill University is located. And it's important to recognize that this land has long been a place where people have come together to exchange not only goods but ideas. For generations before European settlers arrived, this land was and still is inhabited by indigenous peoples. We take this time to honor the role of two nations that are in our history, the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. Doing a land recognition is not just a formality. In fact, it might be better to call it a people recognition instead, because these words remind us of our ongoing commitment to the path towards reconciliation, not just with the past, but with the current reality of thousands of indigenous people from all nations living here today as our neighbors. If you are an immigrant or a descendant of settlers like me, I encourage you, wherever you are, to seek out as much information as you can about the people who have cared for the land you're on, long before you or your ancestors arrived. By learning about the history and present situation, we open ourselves to others, and it becomes possible to work on reconciliation. Let's begin our workshop on crafting a personal sacred space by talking about the word sacred itself. It's a word that often gets used to define something separate or different from the ordinary. But I know it's not a term that everyone is comfortable with due to personal experiences or to a different cultural heritage. But one thing I do know is that our words and labels have meaning. So what we choose to call this space we're carving out for ourselves, well, it matters. It'll be the word or words we use to talk about it with others, and it will inevitably say something about our inner self, our spiritual self. There's no right or wrong word for this place, and what you choose to call it, and even how you define sacred, can certainly change over time. In our first exercise of this workshop, we're going to explore some commonly used words to describe these spaces. If you want to follow along with the worksheet developed for this exercise, just click on the links. You can also open a text editor to jot down some notes or simply grab a piece of paper. If there's someone in your household who's doing this workshop with you, make sure that each of you have something to record your notes. After some individual reflection, you can share your personal responses if you want to. Of course, you can also do that with a friend who's online. At any time in this workshop, you can always press pause and take however long you need to do the activities. Let's get started with the first one, the one for naming your space. I'm going to read a few words that are relatively common ways of describing these spaces, but that doesn't mean they're all completely interchangeable. I've included the same list on your worksheet. As I read them, or as you read them to yourself, become aware of how you respond to them. Which ones resonate with you? Which ones don't? Sometimes our first impression is the best gauge. It's our gut reaction. So think about it, but don't overthink it. Let your feelings guide you in choosing how you want to define this space. You might call it a shrine, an altar, or a prayer space. You might call it a sanctuary, a retreat, or your holy place. If you speak other languages in addition to English, maybe there's a word in another language that comes to mind. Take a moment to write down one or more names you want to call your space. When you're done, if you'd like to, you can share your responses with a friend. So now we've had a chance to reflect on what it is that is so special about this space and what we're going to call it. For me, I call mine a personal altar. This is a term that I'm comfortable with, and it's something that resonates with my background and culture. So you might hear me use that term in this workshop, but that is by no means universal or even a recommendation for what you should call your own space. Step 2 in our process is thinking about why we're doing this. If we're taking the time to set up a sacred space or an altar in our home, then what are we hoping to experience? Don't want to think about this as a transaction, but rather as simply being intentional about the space. So just like we did in step 1, for this second activity, I'm going to read aloud a few possibilities of purpose and experience you might be looking for. Just like in the first one, you can follow along in the worksheet provided, where you'll see the same list. You might not have a clear idea yet of what you're hoping to experience, but maybe one of these ideas will spark a response, or maybe several of them will. You don't have to limit the purpose of your space to just one thing. The important concept here is to be intentional. We're not trying to create something that's merely a decoration, but instead we're looking for something meaningful that will help us create an experience or state of mind we're seeking. So let's look at these possibilities. Remember, you can press pause at any time to write down your notes. You might be creating the space to experience serenity, a sense of peace, or as a physical space for centering. You might be creating the space as a way to seek connection with yourself, your God, or your family, or to generate a space for intimacy. It might be a space whose purpose is for reflection, inspiration, or contemplation. Perhaps the space is to recharge, to get energy, a sense of renewal and focus. And maybe the space is an intentional spot for you to do your journaling, your prayer, or simply to be thankful. Take a moment to write down your intentions for your space. When you're done, if you'd like, you can share your responses with a friend. Now that we've had a chance to reflect on our intentions, we've come to the third step, which is choosing a physical space in our home. This space needs to suit whatever intention we chose. At the in-person sessions I've given for this workshop, people sometimes question what I mean about a personal sacred space that could also have the intention of family and connection. The reason I mention these purposes is because we are very much interconnected with each other. In these times of physical distancing, the absence of these rituals can leave us feeling out of sorts and disconnected. But there are ways to create spaces where family is invited to these spaces as well. In our homes, we have places where many rituals take place, often without us even noticing. Just think about your household's kitchen. While special meals and holidays are obvious ritual gatherings, many people have informal rituals like sharing morning coffee or tea with loved ones. And then there are entrances and hallways where you can carve out a sacred space that can be seen each time you or a family member or guest comes through the door, creating that opportunity to reflect or to connect. If you choose a more private space like your bedroom or a little private nook, you can still infuse it with the purpose of family and connectedness. You can have photos of family members and dear friends, living or past, or reminders of special moments you shared with your loved ones. Even the tiniest homes can make room for a sacred space. It can be the corner of a desk, a windowsill, a section of your bookcase, or even a wall. Vertical space can be used as well, so if you want to hang something from the ceiling, you can do that, or put something in the window. That's also possible. Maybe you're lucky enough to have a patio or a balcony or even a backyard. Natural environments can be wonderful locations for sacred space. They may be more or less private, depending on whether or not other people can easily access these spots. And here, there's a whole range of scale, since you can do a walking meditation labyrinth, for example, in a backyard, or a little corner shelf with meaningful objects on your urban balcony. You can even just use the window itself to access nature if you can't actually go outside. A friend of mine put one of those suction cup hummingbird feeders on her window, and she pulls up a chair to contemplate nature as part of her personal ritual, without even going outside. If you're focusing on more contemplative practices for your space, then you'll want to make sure you choose a location that's calm. If you're using your bedroom, you want to make sure that you've selected a space away from distractions. I have an altar on my bedside table, but not on the top part where my phone and alarm clock are. Instead, I use the lower shelf, so when I sit on the floor, my altar is at eye level, and I'm not thinking about my phone and messages. Let's pause now and give ourselves some time to think about where we want to create this space. You can even sketch out what you think your dream spot might look like. Maybe, after listening to this workshop, you've got a few ideas for several different sacred areas around your home, some private and some public. Take a moment to list those spots and think about how the physical space will help support the purpose you've given it. When you're done, you can share your responses with a friend if you'd like. The fourth step in our process is actually where a lot of people start. This is the step where we'll be thinking about what items we want to use in our space. If you've been following along with the first three steps, you'll see how your space is already taking shape in your mind, and you can probably imagine yourself using the space for the purpose you've dedicated it for. When it comes to objects, there are no rules other than pick things that are meaningful for you. For some, especially for our religious students, there might be items that immediately come to mind. Things like icons and prayer beads, statues and holy books are quite common. But if you're not affiliated with a particular religion, you might wonder what you can use that will still be sacred. As we discovered in step 1, everyone's idea of sacred is different and very personal. Religious objects can be mixed in with secular ones. It's not uncommon to see natural elements in both religious and secular altars, because nature is something that resonates with all of us, and it's a rich source of symbolism. Flowers and plants, whether real or artificial, can add that visual reminder of nature's wondrous beauty. And photos of loved ones are also common, because so much of who we are and what we have to be grateful for comes from the people in our lives. If you're planning on using your space with your eyes closed, for example, to meditate, you might want to draw on your other senses. Consider fragrant herbs, incense, or sage. If you choose to use candles, whether they're scented or not, be very careful. If you think there's even a slight chance you might fall asleep, use electric candles instead. There are many types available that imitate a flickering flame without the fire hazard. Let's get started on our fourth activity, which is making a list of items we want to use in our space. I want to challenge you to use what you have already, without going out and buying more stuff. Check your drawers, your boxes of mementos, check your phone for any photos you can print off, or maybe a special piece of music you've saved. Our most meaningful items cannot be purchased in a store. So let's pause and take however long you need to make the list in this step. If you're creating collaborative sacred space for your household, invite them to contribute to this list. Now we've come to our fifth and final step, using the space. Remember that this is not merely a decoration, but a space you've created with an intended purpose. It's about interior design in the sense of your inner self, and not the home improvement kind of design. As different meaningful objects come into your life, you can rearrange the items on your altar. Maybe there's a special event in your life, or a holy day, or just a change of seasons. We are linked to all different kinds of cycles, so there's no reason why your altar can't reflect that. The most important thing is to use your space. Once you've taken the time to gather your items and create a purposeful space, make sure you're able to carve out time to use it. So go ahead and pray, meditate, journal, give thanks, read, breathe, reflect, or center yourself. Try to find ways to incorporate this space into a routine. It might be easier to develop a routine or to enhance your practice if you're able to connect with other people who are also trying to do the same thing. We are incredibly social beings, and having the support of other people is so important to spiritual life. Even in times of physical distancing, there are opportunities to experience community in online groups and forums. Check out the MORSL website for listings of regular live meetings for various religious and spiritual communities, mostly based in Montreal, but some in other parts of the world as well. Until we can get back to face-to-face meetings, having access to virtual spaces is the next best thing. In addition to promoting the online groups of our community partners, MORSL also offers its own online spiritual and multi-faith programs. Join us for weekly yoga classes, Monday morning check-in chats, guided meditation, and various workshops like this one. We also have a student-centered magazine called Radix that offers space for literary and artistic exploration of themes related to our spiritual selves. Additionally, we are extremely fortunate to have a wide network of community faith leaders who offer pastoral care to our students. Please reach out to us or any of our network partners if you need to talk. To keep on top of our latest offerings, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter and like and follow us on social media. You'll have access to a great source of event listing for us and our partners, as well as interesting reads and inspiration. Thank you for watching this workshop on crafting sacred space at home. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to see photos of what you've created for your own purpose. So if you'd like to share those, or if you have any comments or questions, please email me or call our office line. We'd be really happy to hear from you. Thanks again, and be well.